Danke and guten Morgen. I think it's still morning. Really nice to be here. And after Jean-Francois's talk, I think I could talk about something completely different, but I'll try and stick to my script. I'm pretty hopeless at sticking to time, but we'll see how we go. And I think a lot of what Jean-Francois was just talking about is very relevant to this whole construct of numeracy and how we have developed numeracy in the time that I've been involved. And in the room is Ido, who was my predecessor as the chair of the Numeracy Expert Group for the Adult Literacy and Life Skills Survey, the All Survey, and then for PIAAC Cycle 1. And I think what Laura was saying about the development of the framework and the items is really, really critical. When we travelled in the late 90s and started on this bit of work, I don't think I was aware of how comprehensive the process was, and that I thought I'd be going to Canada to help write test items. Well, I don't think we started to write test items for about 18 months because we had to develop the framework first. We had to prove what it was we were trying to assess and describe what we were trying to assess. And that sort of level of complexity is what makes, I think, the work of PIAAC so amazing and so rich. So I want to, I guess, thump the table. My passion, again, Laura was saying, has been working in adult literacy and numeracy for most of my life. And that certainly in the country I come from, Australia, everybody believes how important literacy is, but they don't believe how important numeracy is in comparison. So I guess I just want to share some insights about why I think numeracy is really critical, and that I think PIAAC gives us the data and the information on how we might move forward. And I think the work that Jean-Francois and the team have been working on in terms of trying to describe this complexity as you progress up the levels. And one of the things I've always argued is that literacy and numeracy are so integrated and intertwined. And so when we're looking at these drivers of complexity, there is this overlap and you can't divorce them. And so in terms of literacy, you have to take on board problem solving and some of the numerical or the mathematical aspects. And in numeracy, we have to do the same. And so I think it is about the interaction between the text and task complexity. I've been living this life for too long now. When I talk to my maths education colleagues, I naturally start talking about task and text complexity, because to me, that's what it's all about. And in terms of numeracy, you have this added complication of the maths content. Is that extra dimension that needs to be measured? So I now get on to what I was going to talk about. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues on the expert group. So as we go from the left around to the right, there's Javier from Spain, there's yours truly, there's Terry Maguire from Ireland, Isabel de Monte from Belgium. We borrowed, I worked on PISA for 2012 for 5 years at ACR, and Isabel was one of the test development centres for PISA, so I helped oversee the work that all the test development centres were doing. So Isabel, to me, was a perfect fit to come onto the PIAAC expert group. Kees Hoogland from the Netherlands, who unfortunately passed away in June this year, was a dynamic. Have we got people from the Netherlands here? Anybody? Yeah. Anybody who's met Kees, you never forget Kees whenever you've met Kees, and he was an instrumental person in the development of the framework and in the test development and in the work that Jean-Francois we've been doing. So that report was published in May this year, and Kees died in early June. So we did get to see the fruition of that piece of work. And Vince Geiger, who is also from Australia. So I just want to quickly share to you why I think numeracy is critical. You can read, there's multitudes, hundreds, thousands of reports about how important, what the skills are that people need in their lives and at work at the moment. So I wanted to share an Australian report, which is very accessible, from the Foundation for Young Australians. They talk about the new smarts. But if you look at what they say, to me, that description, maybe the entrepreneurial mindset's a little bit different, but basically to me that's saying you need literacy and numeracy and problem-solving skills, which is what PIAAC assesses. So, you know, there are so many reports that say the skills people need in the 21st century are the skills that PIAAC measures, and there's no question about it. This was a report, you look at, in terms of my area of numeracy and mathematics, there's report after report after report. This is an example from the Royal Society in the UK that basically says the world we're living in is now full of data, and you need to be much better at being able to work with big data and the intersection with technology and digital skills. And again, this need to have those skills in order to interpret data and to be able to critically reflect is really, really critical. So I don't care what you look at in terms of AI, or whether you're talking about robots or spraying in terms of agriculture, or planting crops in agriculture where technology has taken over. You need problem-solving skills, but you also need numeracy and mathematical skills in order to problem solve and be able to program or run whatever the equipment is and the technology is. So having those problem-solving skills and the numerical skills and the math skills to do any of this is really critical the more we move into AI. And the OECD very recently published their AI literacy framework, and if you have a look at the different elements of that framework, you'll see that there are things to do with literacy, problem-solving, numeracy and mathematics. So we can't avoid it as we move further and further into the 21st century, that you need the skills that PIAAC assesses. So this is the definition of numeracy for PIAAC Cycle 2. You can see there are a few things that I highlighted there, which are some of the cognitive processes and the representations. And of course we have this amazing time when we develop the framework and the construct, but then the test developers have got to write items that represent what it is we've said is important. And so the challenge is, how do you write items to do that? But I think that's the things Laura was talking about, this ability for the experts to work with the test developers to make sure we can assess what it is we're saying people need in the 21st century. That's some of the detail, but independently the literacy group and the numeracy group came up with definitions. We didn't collaborate, and when we got together to say, here's our definition, the overlap and the consistency between the two were really strong, and about that need to be able to reason and critically reflect. The other thing I'd like to say, what's important in PIAAC Cycle 2 is that we argued and won the argument that we needed the numeracy components. The expert group then spent many, many meetings and many, many strong debates about how the hell we could assess something in a short period of time. So we came up with what we called an assessment of number sense. So we have two sets of questions. Can you count? And we have them randomly or in groups or in arrays. And then we had, which is the biggest number. So easy to implement, weren't dependent on language or literacy. The amount of time I spent even getting the wording right with Capstan, the linguistic sort of quality assurance group, was probably 3 or 4 months to get the wording right. But those items worked. We had to throw out anything that had fractions and decimals percentages because they move up to level 3. We wanted these to be below level 1. So that's the set of items that are in PIAAC Cycle 2. So you can see the blue ones are the components that we did not have before. So you as researchers can now have a look at what adults can do across the whole spectrum, up to level 5. Those 2 red dots at the top are also level 5 items. So in terms of numeracy in PIAAC Cycle 2, the data that we have is really, really rich. We have not had that level of information about what adults can do in terms of numeracy and mathematics. We also have timing data from the components. I don't know what the answers are to this, but we have this data. So the left-hand one is the mean time that they took, and then the right-hand one is percentage correct. I think the graphs are amazing. I don't know what the answers are, so somebody has to research what is that data telling us about the questions that we've asked and how quickly people can do them. I don't know the answers. There are a lot of research questions. Again, like Laura said, that if you look at Cycle 1 proficiency descriptions, because the data is richer, we have a lot more we can say about what adults can do at each level. So compare Cycle 1 with Cycle 2, we have a lot more information. So in terms of research, for people to be able to look at what does this mean about our programs, our policies, what we do in the classroom, we have this information that's now available to be dug into and to be mined. In numeracy, to get our Guernsey, when we went from quantitative literacy to numeracy, we had to do a complexity scheme. So it's now old and it probably needs refreshing, but it's available, publicly available. Each of those factors, 2 of them are literacy factors and 3 of them are maths factors, but they do, in a sense, cover that issue about text, task and the interaction between the 2. So I think this now can be updated based on the research that we've been doing. Somebody else can do it. So there is, I guess I thumped the table because I think numeracy really does matter as a separate domain from literacy. So this is PIAAC Cycle 1. Ido and I published this back in 2015. So these are the odds if you're at the top 2 levels, 4 and 5, versus the odds if you're at below level 1 and level 1, of whether you're likely to report good health, being employed, levels of trust, and so on. You can see that there's a number of factors where numeracy has a much bigger impact, or benefit, if you like, than does literacy. So there are these differences between literacy and numeracy. Needs to be updated to PIAAC Cycle 2. But we have known this. The UK longitudinal study said back in the 2000s that literacy alone, isn't necessarily good enough in terms of, disadvantage. Numeracy can be a more powerful indicator, especially if you are female. So, to me, my question to you is to think about in your country, in your state, in your province, in your institution, is numeracy a priority? Is it equal to literacy, or does it get forgotten? I've been playing with AI, so this was a new effort on Sunday. I'd never asked AI to come up with an image before. I've had it helping me do a lot of other stuff. So I explained to it what I wanted an illustration of this, is numeracy buried? So this was what it compared to literacy. So it's interesting, this was about the 3rd iteration. The 2nd iteration, I had to tell my friend there was a disembodied head on the floor. So I actually had to say, sorry, did you realise you put I'm sorry, so the interaction was really interesting. So with AI, you need to have some critical skills. I could have shown you an illustration. I don't know whether it's because I used the word buried or something, but anyway, that's my friend AI. So certainly in Australia, numeracy does not have the profile or the prominence that literacy does. In Australia, I'd say literacy is seen as sexy, numeracy isn't. So why is that the case? And is it the case in your countries? When I go and visit other countries, they often say, yes, it's the same story here. Is it because numeracy is invisible or maths is invisible? Is it because people are happy to put their hand up and say, I'm no good at maths or numeracy, whereas they're never happy to say that about reading? And so, it seems to me, think about, are you ignoring numeracy in your country? Can it be made a priority? Is it made a priority in training of teachers, in vocational education and training, or in schools? Anito, who is here, did some research recently about how much numeracy research is, and it's less than 2% of published academic research is about numeracy in terms of adult education. Mary, Jane and I, who were on the original expert group, did a survey back in the early 2000s in America, and it was less than 1% of the information we found was about numeracy. So I guess, and also, this is just me having a thing, we talk about multi-literacies all the time. I think we should be talking about multi-numeracies. How can you be financially literate if you're not numerate? So there's lots of questions, but I think the data is there for you to mine, and it's rich, and I think numeracy should not be forgotten. Thank you.